there was a time when there was no internet. The World Wide Web, the US military created that so that they could, you know, basically fire nuclear missiles back at the Russians, and a few nuclear strikes on America wouldn't interfere with the network too much. It was a resilient digital network for sending military information around, but then it got used for other things. And then one weekend, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, working at CERN, decided he needed a better way of sharing his data with his colleagues. So he asked for a bit of time off work, and I think he took about 5 days off. He wrote HTML. You put HTML together with the World Wide Web, and suddenly you evolved the internet. But there was no idea when those two things first came into existence we'd get to the world we're in now. And I think with smart cities and the idea of the Internet of Things and the Internet of Place, we're again on that kind of edge of something where we really don't know what's going to happen, but I think it's going to be something really quite dramatic. So now I think it's worth putting it out to you guys for some questions for the panel. Any questions?
Sorry, right at the back. It's Tim Stranack from Community Fibre. I just wanted to get the panel's view on which is the smartest city at the moment, and if you've got any examples of good applications. I think Chris already said there wasn't one, but might be time for him to respond to that.
Okay, yeah, I'll live up to my own challenge. So I've got a personal rating from a UK perspective. The smartest place I'd say at the moment is Bristol. And this is for a number of reasons. A bit of serendipity, some visionary people in the local council, a dynamic mayor, some very influential bottom-up approaches, which I think is a catalyst for its success. Why isn't Bristol a really smart city? Because it still doesn't have joined-up information that leads to positive outcome that has a difference. Exactly what our keynote was saying. You've got to take advantage of the information. So the information is being created, it's being collated, it's being loved and nurtured, tick in the box. The information, the infrastructure that brings people together is starting to happen in these places. But fundamentally, we're still not taking advantage of that information and making dynamic impact on the ground that makes people's lives easier and puts smiles on people's faces. We're a long way from that. Other places coming up, they're good, even Birmingham. I know some of the work that Hugo and the Smart City Birmingham team are doing. We're all moving in the right direction, but we've got to disconnect the hype of the tech industry versus the reality on the ground. And it would all start off with, you know, trying to not pat this government on the back, but they've made a good decision today that they announced 400 million for digital infrastructure. It should be 4 billion, and the advantage should, and the ambition should be fibre to our doors by 2020, not fibre to a cabinet and maybe to your door by 2030. We're moving in the right direction, guys, but we've got to speed up, we've got to get better connected, more collaborative, and then we'll be truly smart.
Exercise chair's prerogative and focus on this table, see if I can get one question from you guys, because I think you're probably going to have a keener view of what's coming on the horizon than a lot of us.
You mentioned a bottom-up approach, and what exactly is that with regards to a city and technology as opposed to economics?
I'm going to ask Hugo to answer that, because you've got some really good examples coming on in Birmingham.
Bottom-up approach, in other words, going and hacking the system. You see an opportunity, you take it. That's really the bottom-up. Rather than waiting for policy to come down from above and blaming the government for not doing this, or one of my we have 3 themes here: health, transport, and sustainability. If I take, I'll do health, my wife's a health practitioner. Different parts of this city have different ways of taking responsibility for their health. Some people will turn up and go, there's my health problem, to their practitioner, now you solve it. And then you'll then get other people turning up saying, I'm sorry, I've cut my arm off, can you help me? And you get this fascinating mix. And now with a smart city, there is a massive cultural shift that needs to happen where people participate in that bigger part to it. So from the ground up, we run hackathons here. And so you get things, we're doing one at the moment called Birmingham in Real Time, where anyone could go and upload their own video along with the haptics. So that would then mean, instead of having to wait for how long does Google Street View normally take to update? Anyone have looked at their own Street View lately? Good grief, get animated, people. And this is what, I'm being a bit cheeky, but exactly what you just did now, of just sitting waiting for someone to respond, is a problem. You need to participate. You need to be willing to just go slightly out of your comfort zone. And that's what you're back to Bristol. You have places like Set Squared and the communities around there that are making it happen. If I use Durham, they've got a top-down approach, but also feeding in through the university. Paris are coming at it from another angle, but they're very passionate about open data. And it needs, and this is why you guys are being invited today, along with others. You need to suddenly realize that anyone can engage. You've got the access there. And it's the hackathons.
Just to add to that, I think there's 3 points. One is trust, one is benefit, and the other is, I suppose, is really purpose. But the trust piece is really interesting. Trust in decision makers and trust in leaders has really plummeted over the last 20 or 30 years. So, for example, the top level journalism, if you like, on what you previously called broadsheet, has gone from 60-something to now 20-something percent. So trust ratings are at a low. Pollsters aren't trusted for obvious reasons. So the trust issue is a really important one when it comes to our data. One of the points, again, that's been made already. The second point was around purpose and benefit, I suppose. So, what's the benefit? What problem are we trying to solve for people? What's the entry point, if you like, for an organisation or an individual? So I think that, throwing it back out is what problem, what issue would you want to address, and how could you do that through giving and receiving information in a smart and connected environment, whether it's shopping or health or society aspects. It could be around decision making as well, and participation in decision making. So there's a quid pro quo here, I think, that I'm really interested in talking about today.
Well, you've got the panel animated, so we'll take one last response before we move on.
Yeah, so I am looking this purely through an energy lens, but I think there's also a place, when we talk about bottom-up, there's also a place for the private sector or for commercial businesses to get involved actually and drive that bottom-up desire or even opportunity for businesses to get involved. So rather than, if you think through the sort of macro energy policy position, rather than waiting for smarter distributed generator type cities where small locations are responsible for their own energy generation. They can then transport that energy, use that energy, sell that energy back, rather than waiting for energy policy to sort of fall in line to that. Organisations are out there, National Grid being one of them, that are actually identifying where these opportunities are, going out, approaching communities, local authorities, universities, manufacturing sites, and actually giving them an opportunity to drive their own energy network. So I think it's incumbent on us all as individuals to do that, and we were Hugo was talking about hackathons and having that desire to do that. There's also a place there for people to make money, and as soon as you see that, as soon as you start to get that opportunity and that environment in place, that drives the bottom-up approach as well.
We've definitely warmed up. Now for the second question.
Hello, thank you panel, thank you Alex for inviting me today. My name's Colin Rankine, I'm the head teacher at Homeschool Social Enterprise. Now, looking at the type of questions and the type of problems that you actually want to answer, I find it quite unique. We're a school, we're a social enterprise, we're a charity and we're a ministry as well. The main problem, the issue that you thought about the engagement of your end user, and looking through it, it's something called fear. Now, from the ministry side, that's something that's not one of the fruits of the spirits. Now, when you have one of the fruits of the spirits, it's engaging, love, empathy. You can attune it to Maslow, Hertzberg, those type of actualizations. Now, when you look at the children that we have at homeschool that can't read and write, so they're not really interested in technology, they don't have smartphones, they're not engaging, they're still part of the city. So when you look at how to engage them, you've really got to look at how your technology interacts on other people. We do a ministry outreach where we walk around the Birmingham city centre. We spoke to people who are coming from Europe, Ukraine, Romania, who are on our streets. They don't know there's a food kitchen down the road. So you could say, okay, how does that affect you in a smart city where you have people, huge numbers of homeless who are defecating and you get the usual smells of the city. The way you can eliminate that by using that technology is by having that hub, helping people to use that information who are not tech savvy. So again, by sort of being more engaging in all of society as regards those movers and shakers, the ones at the top are the ones that can access technology, that's great. But how are you going to bridge that gap between those kids who are not in school now, or whether they find our institution or the institutions to learn the basics of reading and writing? How are you really going to make that technology applicable to them where they're a growing number rather than the elite?
Okay, I think we have a panel member volunteering to answer that one. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to answer it, if that makes sense, but I think that something that, so I've spent, my career is 20 years in technology and using technology predominantly in the boardroom. So helping some of the world's, so National Grid, I've done a lot of work with National Grid before, helping boards drive and make decisions for change. And I think the thing that I find interesting in some comments that have been made today about, the gentleman said about hackathons and, using technology, taking responsibility. I think it's great, but the reality is the world that we live in isn't made up of the people that even know what a hackathon is. We go outside this room, they haven't got a clue. My sales team are talking to an organisation today, they've got 60,000 employees. Most of them don't speak English. But they make the world go round. They make decisions, they live in our cities. And I think that what technology people have to do is actually go back and say, let's forget everyone in this room because we're irrelevant. We'll take care of ourselves, we'll drive decisions ourselves. But it's the people that you talked about before. And I think what we've learned as a business is that people want to take care of themselves. They want to be well, but they don't know how to do it. And I think that's where people, you've got to start using technology. And I think big businesses have got a responsibility to actually help those individuals. Because you're right, not everyone has a smartphone, but if we could just get businesses to say, in every one of our locations, let's put access to a smartphone or smart technology, then people would use it. And instead of using technology to be educated and putting a barrier that you can't read or write, get rid of that and actually enable somebody to press the buttons and do what they want. Just like you see in supermarkets where you leave and you hit happy or sad face. Do you sort of see what I mean? So I think we've got a responsibility to flip it, is what I want to try and say.
It's a really interesting question, so we'll take another response on that.
Yeah, I think Chris and I are probably about to say the same thing, but we might not. I think absolutely, the technology can break down those barriers. It's incredibly intuitive, and the ability then to interact with somebody in one of those situations you were describing, is absolutely possible, isn't it? And it's liberating. So just one example, enabling older people to live in their own home for longer. It's incredibly technology that I think we're on the cusp of, or is right there now, whether it's autonomous vehicles or all sorts of initial response kind of stuff. Sensor technology can really help a fundamental part of the later phase of your life. You can live in your own home for longer. Live in relative liberty for longer, and I think that's a really positive outcome for an individual and for a family and for a community and for a place. So that's the way I'm looking at this, and I'd say sort of push back. And how are you going to use technology in the circumstances and situations you were describing to overcome some of those barriers? And there's a whole bunch of people can help make that happen.
I've got some good news for you. Hands up who can type really fast on a QWERTY keyboard. Okay, so that's probably a good majority of you. Bear in mind, we've already said that you're part of the 1%, so you don't really count. So in the next 2 years, you'll find that you will type less and less onto your mobile device. That's because you're going to use voice. And my cousin, who's got severe cerebral palsy, is an advanced smartphone user. He has a unique relationship with Google. He just talks to his phone. He can't type because he can't spell. He can't actually read very well either. So he's got to have a voice-based interaction. But he has an encyclopedic knowledge of song lyrics for West End shows. That's his thing. He's slightly autistic as well. But he didn't learn them because he read them. He just asked Google to go to YouTube to play them to so he could learn them by rote. Now, if that's not solving a digital disengagement by using technology in a cool way, I have one other gem for you. Who's read Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Okay, not enough of you. The answer is 42. So in that book, he talks about the Babelfish. Now, we have real-time translation available for you. So the idea of having different people of different languages and cultures interacting with us as one single global community is actually here. We shouldn't use language and therefore ignorance as a reason not to talk to each other. It should just happen. And that technology is alive here today, now, and you can buy online. So that's pretty cool.
John was keen to come in as well.
Yeah, so one of the challenges we have at National Grid is how do we engage with people when we are going to be disrupting a community and 10% of the people that live in that community engage with us. Now, if I translate that to a similar sort of example that you were giving, what technology can allow us to do is identify how big the community is in which we can't engage with digitally. So forget the platform, forget the vehicle, forget the device, forget any of that. But actually what technology can do, what data can give us, is tell us that there is a huge swathe of people out there that you're referring to that are disconnected from us in a digital platform. And that allows us to then rethink how we engage. And we go back to the old-fashioned way of talking, but at least we know the size of the prize. At least we know the size of the community in which we need to go out and engage too. So coming back to your point, I think that regardless of technology, being a mechanism to engage, what it can do if you lift it up another level is can tell you the need to engage differently and why that's out there. So I think those people that are disaffected, the people that don't have the opportunity to converse in a technological way, actually at least we know that they're out there and it tells us what you don't know. That's the important thing for me.
Okay, thanks. That was a good question, and I'm just going to put my 2 pence in on that before we go to Alex, who wants to respond. I remember the days before iPhones and smartphones, and the mobile phone was just for the very affluent businessman. It was a massive status symbol, incredibly expensive, largely useless at the time. Nobody could have imagined that 15, 20 years on, it's actually the most excluded people in society that depend most heavily on their smartphones and their mobile phones, because that is their one device that plugs them into the rest of the world. You know, their friends, their family, how to access services, how to access benefits, how to connect with work.
Right, so now that I've got you all together, so my question, and I've asked it to you all individually before, is I get technology, you know that. I get everything that you guys are doing, but it's out there. And Colin talked about the fact that people are here, and we've got people right here. So there is a barrier, and that barrier is just the who says move first. So it has to come to them, in my opinion. And I'm wondering how you think that you can bring what you are talking about. So your cousin, so he has, I don't know, maybe he's access through you. So how does that get to people? So James, how do we get people to own their wellness using smart technology, using whatever mechanism? John, you know, how do we bring that to people? How do we get them to out of their chair? Because everybody seems to be wanting to do it, but there is this invisible barrier, it seems, to doing it. We have a view, as you know, but I'm interested in your view.
So I love that question, and it's something that, for me, you guys could teach us a lot about, if that makes sense. And why I say that is that essentially the way we get well-being to people, our vehicle, yes, like you say, is technology. The way we're getting to people is going to the world's biggest employers and saying, you need to look after your people because you can't, and the gentleman earlier said, you know, if you take the people out, you've just got buildings, you know. But I think that what we've got to start to do is try and pull together. You know, I'm thinking about you and the National Grid and access to people. You know, I've had a conversation with Vodafone where they're saying, could we give you a phone for every license that we give to somebody to make them well? So they've got that medium, so we break down barriers. And I think that an exercise that we've got to try and do is, instead of it being the classic, you know, you go through education, you go and get a job, and then, you know, your employer sells things to you, I think we've got to come away and look at how we help people in a different way. You know, is there a way that we can, as a society of people, pull together so that it doesn't mean you have to buy access to my product, or etc., if that makes sense?
I'll back up that. So I firmly believe that we've been measuring the wrong thing when we talk about success in our societies. We've got this maniacal focus on GDP, which is capitalism's answer to try and get a very blunt number to make your place tradable against another place. It forgets the very human aspect of what place is about. People make places, and a collective intelligence and ingenuity and innovation makes those places thrive. And one place is different from another place, even though you might have the same types of people there, because we're all kind of different. That's what makes humanity really cool and interesting, yet deeply frustrating, because we're also stupid and selfish. But hey ho, we are where we are. So to my mind, to answer that question, Alex, you've got two things that you need, which is trust, which John's already alluded to, and economics. We are all selfish economic actors, but if we actually use information to provide different types of numbers that say to us as a collective, as a community, we need to be more sustainable, we need to leave the planet in a better place than we inherited it, we need to get buy-in for those numbers. What are those numbers that are important? So I'll give you air quality as an example. Air quality in cities is driven by the most part, congestion of combustion engine cars. To fix air quality, you could do one thing very simple: ban cars. Well, that won't happen because cars are also fantastic actors in their own right of driving economic value. The amount of jobs people use are created to keep the car there and ongoing and keep it going and make it in the first place. And also the fact that it's carrying you as an economic actor going to someone else who's another economic actor, and you're going to do some really cool things because you're having a conversation. How many of us came here today by car, either by mixed mode or directly? Probably a majority of us, because it's a really cool way of getting around from A to B. But if we wanted to do something with congestion and actually do something different, we'd offer a different view on mobility and put air quality, as well as the speed of journey and the cost of journey and the comfort of your journey, as one of the prices which you're using in capitalism as a way of using behaviour. It comes back to the economics, to try and nudge you to do the better thing. So there's a project John and I are involved in together, Innovate UK funded, which is using what we call smart nudges, snudges, to do the right thing so you have an innovative, yeah, it is innovative, so you have the right type of sustainable behaviour in your use of a commercial building. So don't turn on the air conditioning when it's easier to open up the window. Put on a jumper if you're feeling a little bit cold rather than cranking up the heating. It's doing the right thing for your community and using information, different economic indicators like sustainability, find out what those numbers are, share that information, be collaborative with how you want to fix it, and then you'll find that you're being smarter.
One more on that one.
Value, not cost. And I think large organisations are the ones that probably need to and are better placed actually to lead on this, particularly long-term investment organisations like National Grid. And John and I have talked about this in the past. It's weird that we all know each other a little bit, or some of us do. But for example, the value of getting people better quicker, you know, is the job of the health service and a hospital, for example. So how can you design the building with this not just the services within it, but the whole building, the whole point of that building, to get people better quicker, which might be about having a view, for example. So you see nature, you see the outside, you get better quicker. It's part of the healing process, the psychology, the mental aspect, as well as the physical aspect. That's where BIM is going. That's the whole point of Building Information Modelling acronym. The whole purpose of the next levels is really about understanding the value, the purpose. It's not just the cost. It's not how cheap can I make this building, but does it perform for the people, the things that are going on within that building, whether it's a house, a shop, a restaurant, an office, a hospital, or whatever. And that relates to health and well-being. Absolutely. It relates to mobility. It relates to longevity. It relates to design. It relates to flexibility. Ultimately, therefore, it relates to the use of materials, waste, water, product in, product out, circular economy priorities, and so on. So it's beyond sustainability in that sense. It's absolutely embedded. And the things there, so you started off by talking about, you know, what is a smart city? It's those things. And so that's what ultimately what we're working on, but it's about the value, not the cost. And we're all obsessed with how much is that brick, how much is that house, but actually what's the purpose? And over the lifetime of that building, what's the cost and what's the value? So how comfortable am I? How functioning are we? And what's the outcome? Is it a better outcome? And that's what I'm judging everything on. So again, you know, give us some problems and I think we can probably solve them with you.
Okay. Good responses, I think. But I'm surprised you missed one which popped into my head straight away, which is that I think people don't buy products anymore. I think with the emergence of marketing, people buy feelings. And certainly in my experience, if you're trying to get somebody to sign up for something unfamiliar, you need to convince them it will make them feel better in some way, and almost sidestep the technology. Certainly all the people I know that own iPhones, they don't own them for technical reasons. It tends to be for emotional reasons.
Well, and it solves problems through combination. Last year I took a year out to write virtually a book on that, some of that stuff, to do with, well, effectively servicisation of food. So it's a good example. The short version, whether it's Amazon, Uber, Google or Tesco, it doesn't really matter, but you will be buying a service that keeps you fit and healthy, cheaper for longer. And actually, the quid pro quo is you spend more money longer because you live longer, which is great. Everyone's a winner. But ultimately, the food that you eat is becoming a service. It will be delivered. It will miraculously appear. Your fridge will be doing a lot of work for you. Your kitchens will be different and smaller, more just in time, less packaging. All of those principles, if you like. The bit that's really important is trust. And the consequence is the role of local government, which I'm really interested in, and probably being smaller and more bespoke and more specific. So, yeah, I did forget to mention that, but there's a 50,000 word thesis on it.
Cheers, John. And I think the trust is a word that's going to be coming up quite a lot in this, trust to get people using things. So another question, perhaps towards the back, I was going to say towards the back-ish. So we've got 3.
Hi, David Triggs. I'll be talking to you later about the code on your badge, explaining what that means. But listening to this debate was fantastic. There's a question about, aren't we at the crossroads, and there's a high risk that the more the technology does for us, the more we could create a nanny state, and a bigger and bigger nanny state. And in fact, you just said it, John, right at the end there, when actually we should be talking about government and local government as more of a nano state, and smaller. So I'd like to know is how are you going to put the checks and balances in to protect, because I spent 40 years in education, and the longer I was in, the more we just got young people to pass tests. And it wasn't about creativity, and it wasn't about getting them to think, and it wasn't about using the brains. It was, have you passed a test? Because the check and balance was, where's your school in the league table? So how can you make sure we move more and more to a nano state and not a bigger and bigger nanny state?
All right, thank you. I'm on a 2-minute warning here, so it would be really good if we can get a kind of quick fire round in.
So can I just very quickly jump in on that? I can't answer the question on the nanny state and the checks and balances, but what I can do is explain that actually, certainly in energy, the ability of getting technology and smarter cities is allowing us to deliver a far more localized energy network where you're not then reliant on thermogeneration at a nuclear level or huge gas-fired power stations somewhere on the coast of wherever. You know, the ability then to have a community which is generating their own electricity through solar, through wind, and then transport it and use it themselves is absolutely driving into that nano state, and then you are less reliant on the more centralised function. As to how do you put the checks and balances in place, that's slightly out of my...
So to jump on that one, smart grid is the economic silver bullet in creating a smart city. It puts in place a need for good quality infrastructure. It's a capital project. It generates income. It's supporting all the selfish actors in one common goal. the beauty of what it also creates is a need for governance. And to answer your question directly, that is a new role of local government or trusted entities that we elect to decide what happens to the information that's coming from our systems, including us, because we are a system, as we've alluded to with our smart frame. So governance is the key, enshrined in smart city standards from the BSI, which we're an advocate for. So ticking that box.
But individuals need to take more responsibility, and information's brilliant for that. You know, pushing back, here's some information about stuff, the way things are at the moment. What do you want to do? Which is actually what we're doing through this Innovate UK project, turning humans into sensors. We're trying to nudge the person by giving them information, not nannying them. So someone can choose to make a decision, a different decision. They're given information, they're not given solutions and outcomes. So I think that's key. You're absolutely right, and I'd like to see a nano state, not a nanny state.